We started a series last Sunday called Great Faith. Great Faith. And if you missed it, you should join along with us and catch up on YouTube. But we're starting a 6-week series about this idea that every single one of us, not just me as the pastor or a staff member or a Connect leader, every single one of us in this room are called to live a life of great faith. The Bible says there's multiple levels of faith. We can have no faith, we can have dead faith, we can have a lack of faith, we can have little faith. The Bible also says we can have great faith. And how about you? I don't know, maybe it sounds old school, but the Bible says I can have it, I want to have it. If the Bible says I can live a life of great faith, I want to live a life of great faith. Not only me individually, but I want our church to be known as a church of great faith. And so we're gonna spend the next 6 weeks not just looking at the theme of faith, but the person of faith. His name is Abraham, or Abram. His name becomes Abraham here. Next chapter, we'll read it next week. So we're going through Genesis 11 and Genesis 24 over the next 6 weeks. Looking at this person, this man named Abraham, and he becomes and is known as, in the book of Hebrews, our father of faith. And so last week, we read out of Genesis 11 about his history, about his dad's family named Terah, about how God called him, all the kinds of things. So we read Genesis 11 last week. We're gonna read Genesis 12 today. Genesis 12 and verse 1. If you have a Bible, you can turn there with me. Genesis chapter 12, if not, it'll be on the screen there for you. You can follow along. Genesis chapter 12. Here we go. It says, "And the Lord said to Abraham, leave your father's family, go to a land, leave your native country, leave your relatives and your father's family, and go to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt, and all families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all of his wealth, his livestock, all the people he had taken into his household in Haran, and he headed to the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, and the area was inhabited by the Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I will give you this land, but I'll give it to your descendants. I'll give this land to your descendants. And Abram built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord, who had appeared to him. After that, Abram traveled south and set up camp in the hill country with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he built another altar and dedicated it to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. Then Abram continued traveling south by stages toward the Negev. This afternoon, this morning, I want to talk from the theme, from the idea, the tale of two stories. The tale of two stories. Let's pray as we jump into Genesis chapter 12 today. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for this amazing, amazing story that we are given about this man named Abram, who becomes Abraham and the father of our faith. God, I pray for every single one of us. Maybe this is our first time ever in church, in a space and place like this. It's a bit uncomfortable and a bit new to us, God, and maybe you're raised in church every Sunday of our life. God, I pray that you would open this text. Maybe we've heard it preached many times. God, would you open our eyes anew? Open our heart anew today. God, we don't want to just play church and be in a service and kind of go home the same. God, we're asking for deep and long-lasting change in our heart today, God. Open our eyes to see what you were saying in Genesis 12 today. We want what happened to Abram to happen to us today, God. We want to be known as people of great faith. In your mighty, mighty name I pray. And everyone said? Amen. Wrong tube. Oh man, I'm dying. I need an inhaler. That was the Lord getting back at me. I was at a conference one time here a few years ago with a friend of mine, and we were doing a leadership seminar, a leadership session together. And the theme of the session was how leaders talk to each other. How leaders talk to themselves. And by the way, side note, not in the sermon today, but I think it's worth noting, you better pay attention to how you talk to yourself. Because there is no one in your life that you talk to more than you talk to you. By the way, also, you would never let other people talk to you the way that you talk to you. You would never let other people say that stuff to you, but you let yourself say it to yourself all day long. Watch how you talk to yourself, because you don't listen to anyone as much as you listen to yourself. We're talking about talking to yourself and how leaders talk to themselves, and we started talking about what questions leaders ask themselves and whatever. The last question we were talking about, he said it, and it kind of threw me off, and it was kind of like a dark question at first when he said it, and I was like, I don't really know if I like that question. And his question was, every single person should ask themselves, what do they want said at their funeral? And when he said it, I was like, that's a bit like dark, and I don't really want to think about my funeral. I'm like, 25 at this point, whatever. And he was like, yeah, you should consider what do you want said at your funeral? And I know some of you are like 14 and you're like, I don't really think about my funeral that much. Or maybe you're 80 in the room and everybody in between. I don't want to ask you the same question. What do you want said at your funeral? Have you ever considered that? Not to be dark and dormant, but like that day will come. So it's not like thinking about something that might come. Every single one of us will breathe our last breath on this earth. Whether that be tomorrow or in 80 years from now, every one of us will breathe a last breath on this planet and go into eternity. And I think it's a very valid and deep, provocative question. Like, what do I want said at my funeral? Or I'll submit it a different way. What story do you want told at your funeral? And he goes on to say, as he's asking this question, and I was like, why would you ask that question? He's like, because it's fascinating. All the people that I'm friends with, and I know them, and I ask this question, what is shocking is what they want said at their funeral is nothing like the life they're living. He's like, it's alarming and a bit shocking how big the gap is between what we want said about us and the life we're actually living. I'd like to submit to you, you should ask that question to yourself. Maybe not in this moment, but over the next days and weeks. You should maybe ask, like, what do I want said? And then just work your way backward. Because whatever you want said, you should start living. And I'm going to ask it very specifically with that word. What story do you want told? Because every one of us at our funeral or before even, there's a story being told. There's a story being told about your life. What story do you want told? If you don't know this about the Bible, it's a book of comparisons. It's a book of this and that. It's a book of, Proverbs. Do you want to be lazy or do you want to be fruitful? Do you want to be rich? Do you want to be poor? Do you want to be wise? Do you want to be stupid? Do you want to be a fool? Do you want to be smart? Do you want to be, it's this or that, this or that. All the parables, if you notice, every single parable in the Bible has two characters. Not 15, two. It's almost like every story and every chapter is giving us options. Do you want this or that? You want to live this life or this life? And what's amazing, it's not like 50 options, it's like this or this. And God is constantly comparing and contrasting stories that we want to live. What's amazing about Genesis chapter 12, and for all of you in the room that were raised in church, you've heard Genesis 12 preached multiple times. It's one of preachers' favorite stories about the call of Abraham and leaving his family and leaving his nation and God blessing him and God calling him and him being in his tent and God saying, look at the stars. It's a well-known preaching passage about Genesis 12. I think what we don't realize and what we don't know is Genesis 12 is not written in a vacuum. It's written in comparison to Genesis 11. Genesis 11 and Genesis 12 are mirroring stories that we get to choose what story we want to live. In other words, it's almost like Genesis 11 and Genesis 12 are the tale of two stories that we get to choose which one will we live. I'm going to read Genesis 11 to you and see if you catch it. Genesis 11, same first 4 verses. At one time, all the people in the world spoke the same language and used the same words. As the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylonia, and they settled there. Just look at the details. They began saying to each other, let's make bricks and harden them with fire. Because in that region, bricks were used instead of stone and tar was used for mortar. And then they said, come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. Did you see it? Okay, for those of you that didn't see it, I'll show you. Look at this chart. Genesis 11, it says they said to each other. Genesis 12 says God said to Abram. Genesis 11 said, let's make bricks. God says, I will make. Genesis 11 says, let's make a city for ourselves. God says, I will make you into a great nation. Genesis 11 is about humanity seeking to reach the heavens. Genesis 12 is about the God of heavens coming down to humanity. Genesis 11, they says, we will make ourselves famous. Genesis 12 is, I will make you famous. Genesis 11 is about let's protect ourselves from scattering. Genesis 12 is let's scatter, I will be with you though. It's mirroring stories of complete opposite statements. Genesis 11 is watch us make. Genesis 12 is God saying, I will make. Genesis 11 is saying, let's go to the heavens. Genesis 12 is the God of heavens coming down. Do you see the options? Do you see the tale of two stories? And I want to ask you this morning, do you want to live a Genesis 11 life or a Genesis 12 life? Because I think it's a valid question. What story do you want to be told about your life? I want to go through Genesis 12 this morning because I'd like to just assume by default every one of us in this room want to live a Genesis 11 life. I don't think any of us want to. I'll take Genesis 11. I think we're all like, yeah, I want to live the Abraham Genesis 12 life. This morning, I want to take the 4 phrases that is said about Genesis 12 that I'd like to submit to us. This is what I want, and I hope this is what you want of the story that we want to be told about our life. Number 1, the first phrase I want to take apart is where it says, I will make you. God comes to Abram in Genesis 12, and he opens up with the same phrase Genesis 11 opens up with. They say, we talk to each other, God talked to Abram. The next thing it says is, let's make bricks for ourselves. Genesis 12 starts with, God said to Abram, I will make you. Do you see the comparison of the stories, Genesis 11 and Genesis 12? Genesis 11 is about what we made. Genesis 12 is about what God made. Look at the city we made, look at the tower we made, look at the nation we made, look how famous we become, look at the bricks we made. Genesis 11 is a story of look what I've done. Genesis 12 is a story of look what God has done. What story do you want to be told when people look at your life? Is it a story of look what Andrew built? Or is it a story of look what God built? Who do you want at the center of your story? I don't know about you, but for me, I want people to look at my life whenever I pass on to eternity, and they don't look at what I've done or any success level, anything I've done in this life. I don't want anyone to look and go, man, Andrew did really well. Look what Andrew built. Look what Andrew created. Look at the tower Andrew built. I want people to look at my life. I want people to look at your life and be like, look what God has done. Listen, I went to high school with Andrew. I know he couldn't do that. I was roommates with him in college. I know he couldn't do that. I've known Andrew. What he did in his life, there is no other explanation. There is no other answer than God must have done something, built something, made something. I don't want to be known as look at the bricks I made. I want to be known as look at what God has made. Who do you want to be at the center of your story? My son, he's almost 10 here, but over the last number of years, probably the last like 5 years, he's become obsessed with Legos. Obsessed with Legos. Now to the point, he'll spend 4 or 5 hours building a Lego set. My son a little bit has OCD. I have no idea where he got that from. But his thing is like, Dad, if I open a box of Legos, I'm not gonna leave the table till I finish it. Like I'm gonna either do it or not. And so unfortunately, he's getting good at Legos. So now like my sister and like friends are buying him like 2,000-3,000 Lego piece sets. So he's in the garage. We have a little table where he builds all of his stuff. So my youngest son, Chunks, or Rhodes, won't destroy his Lego set. So he hides in the garage. He'll be there for 4 or 5 hours. About 2 years ago, my oldest sister bought him a 2,300 piece Baby Yoda Star Wars set. And I've hated her ever since. And so he started it, and I don't know if you've done like Legos as of late. They've gotten complicated. You need like a science and math degree to figure out some of this stuff now. It's like he's sitting there, he spent about 2-3 hours, he's built a good majority of it, maybe a little bit, and he comes and he's like, Dad, I can't figure the rest out. I was like, all right. He's like, can you please come help me? So go out in the garage, and I'm starting to help him build this 2,300 piece Lego set. And about 5 minutes in, he was like, Dad, I'll be right back. And he leaves. And about 2 hours in of me building this Lego set all by myself in the garage, it like dawns on me, where did my son go? I'm out here building this by myself. I get him back in, we finish it, it's all great. Well, I don't know, maybe a week later, I had some of my friends over, and Cruz the audacity to walk his 9-year-old self in the garage, grab the baby Yoda, come into my home that I pay for, look at my friends in the face and say, look what I built. I've never wanted to harm my children before, but that was pushed in the envelope. I'm like, look what you built? Joker, I did majority of that. You were there for 90 seconds and you went to go play Fortnite and you left me in the garage. I built that thing. I don't care at all about it. It's nothing to me. Don't worry about it. But I'm still not jaded about it. Obviously, I'm having just a public counseling session. I just want you guys to know. But how often do we do the same thing to God all the time? We start a project, it gets too big for us, so then we invite God into it, and then we leave and go hang out for a bit. God finishes the project. We go to all of our friends. Look at the business I built. Look at the marriage that we have. Look at the money that we've built. Look at the finances. Look at the kids that we're raising. It's obvious our kids are so good because of look at us. It's like, how often do we hold our projects and go, look what I built? And God's like, look, you did what? You helped with 4 of those 2,300 pieces, son. I built that Lego set. I built that marriage. I don't want to, at the end of my life, hold up my little baby Yoda and look at what I spent my life doing. I want to be able to hold something and say, look at what God has built. Look at what God has done. There is no other explanation. There is no other answer. God made this. What story do you want? Look at the bricks I made or look at what God has done? Look at what he's built. Also, Bible gives us detail to say, how old is Abraham when he's called? 75. Why in so many stories are we given their age? The 12-year-old girl who's dead and Jesus heals her, the 75-year-old Abraham, why are we given ages all the time? Because how often do you and do I tell God either we're too young or too old? I want you to come do this. Jesus, I'm 22. Come on, at least wait till I'm 30. I'm a junior in college, Jesus. I'm 14. I'm a freshman in high school. You want me to do what? That's a little beyond me. Or you're 72 in the room and you're like, that's a little too late, Jesus. If you would have called me when I was 50, I would have went, Jesus. I would have started an orphanage at like 50, but now I'm 73 and like you've missed it. You're a bit late. Age is no factor. Season is no factor. Young or old. How often do we put God in our little box? So you can't do this, you can't do that. This is too young, that's too old. I'm too poor, I know this, I know that. I don't have this, I have no degree. How often do we give God our list of things because he can't do it? God supersedes all of the things that we could give him. Abraham's 75 and God goes, yeah, I want you. Who do you want to be the center of your story? God did it or Abraham did it? The next phrase, which I think is one of the funniest sentences in this story, and I think you missed it, and I'll show you why it's funny. Verse 4. It says, Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. So Abraham departed just as the Lord instructed, and Lot went with him. Wait, time out. Reverse back 3 verses. What is the opening verse of Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1? He calls Abraham and says, leave your family, leave your relatives, leave your land, and go to a land I will show you. Time out. Who's Lot? Lot is his nephew. The last time I checked, nephews equal family. I know some of you don't want that, but nephews equal family. Nephew equals relative. Is that not the funniest sentence? So Abraham obeyed and went to a new land as the Lord had instructed, and he took Lot with him. Is that sentence not the sentence of our lives? Obedience, disobedience. If we could have a sentence over our tombstone, if we were honest, how many times say obedience, and some disobedience too? I obey the Lord in all of these ways, not so much here. I just wonder if Abraham thought it was no big deal. I'm departing, aren't I? I'm obeying, aren't I? Just as the Lord instructed, I'm going to bring Lot with me. And if we don't have time today, if you go read the rest of Genesis 12, 13, and half of 14, do you know how much trouble Lot gets Abraham in? He gets kidnapped. Abraham has to pay for him to get out. He loses land, he loses people, he loses cattle. The amount of drama that disobedience will get you in is not worth it. The amount of drama and pain and loss that a small little comma brought into Abraham's life is not worth it. And let me submit the same thought to you. Disobedience always brings drama. Always. And every single one of you in this room, from the back of the balcony to the staff in the front, every one of you, when you start following Jesus, you have a lot to leave behind. You have a lot that Jesus is saying, that's not coming with us. But how many times we're like, I'm gonna obey on all of these ways, but just not this way. It's almost like when you have like a porn issue or something you're trying to figure out, and Jesus like, just delete and throw away your computer, but you just change the password. You're like, well, I'm kind of obeying. Or like he says like quit. You're like, well, I'm not gonna quit, I'll just work from home. And how many times we like halfway obey what Jesus asks us to do, but we just add that comma in, but I'm gonna keep Lot. And you know what's shocking is keeping Lot wasn't sinful, but it was disobedient. Immature Christians or early young Christians tend to ask the question, is it sinful? Where's the sin line? Well, why do we want to get so close to the sin line? Young Christians ask, is it sinful? Mature Christians ask, is it wisdom? Because there are things in your life that are not sinful, but they're not wise, and unwise things always bring dramatic things in your life. So the question is, well, was it sinful for Lot to go? No, it was a family member, but God said no. God said no, so that finishes it. What in your life could you name as a Lot today that God's saying that needs to stay behind? Well, it's not sinful, I said no. Well, it's super close to me, I said no. That could be an attitude, that could be a integrity thing, that could be a substance thing, that could be a relationship, that could be a job, that could be I don't know what it is, but every one of you in this room, God has put his finger on a lot saying, leave that behind. And you're like, well, I'm obeying in all of these ways, comma, I'll just bring a lot though. And how much drama, how much loss, how much frustration will Lot bring you if you keep that in your life? More than you are willing to pay. I'm telling you, but this is the best. You know, the story continues in Genesis 12 and 13. God still calls and uses Abraham. You know what we don't read? God coming down to Abraham going, okay, you messed up, man. You shocked me. I didn't see this coming. I called you. I said, don't bring relatives, and you did. Unfortunately, I'm the God of no mistakes. And because you disobeyed me, I'm gonna go find someone else. Abraham is still, for the rest of Genesis, used mightily despite the comma. We serve a God that even despite the comma, and Lot came with us, he is still full of grace. He is still full of mercy. He is still full of a call. And if you're in the room today saying, man, that's me. I've obeyed in a lot of ways, but I have some commas where I've disobeyed. Good news, the call still remains. The future still remains. The commas and our disobedience, unfortunately, do not sway God. Time out, side note, that is not giving anyone a license to keep doing what you're doing just because grace is available. Well, man, forgiveness is available. I'll just keep living like this and keep asking for forgiveness. That is not how grace works. Grace is not just the erasing of our sin. Grace is the empowering to stop sinning. Grace is not just like, oh, I can do whatever I want, ask for forgiveness. No. If you want to sing about great grace, there will be great change attached to great grace. Because the more you understand the great grace, I don't want to go back. The more I understand the great forgiveness, I don't want to go back. Great grace always leads to great change. So by no means am I giving license away to going, just do whatever you want, ask for forgiveness. Absolutely not. But the reality is we have commas, don't we? I obey in all of these ways, comma, but Lot came. I hate IKEA. Anyone else? Look at the witnesses in the church. If you work at IKEA, Bridgetown's down the road. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I thought that was gonna be funny. You didn't laugh, now it's awkward. Just totally kidding. But I hate IKEA because it's so easy to build. Have you ever moved? And you go to grab those IKEA shelves, and they just whop like a book, they just break. You can't move IKEA stuff. Once you build it, it stays there. You sell the house with the IKEA bookshelf, table, you just leave it. Because it is not worth moving. Because if you try to move IKEA stuff, it ain't making it in that truck, fam. I'm telling you right now. By the time you get to your new home, new apartment, it's done. But how many times do we think God's grace is like IKEA furniture? It's easy, it's there, but it's so soft it can never be moved. It's so flimsy, it can't be moved. God's grace is not IKEA furniture, it is solid. You can have the commas in your life, and God's grace is not gonna fall apart when you move, when you shift, when you make bad decisions. Number one, he says, I want my life to be a story of look what God did. I want my life to be a story of I obeyed. I didn't take Lot with me, but even when I did, God is still there. Number three, it's a bit simple, but I would submit to you might be the most profound thing I'll say all day. Verse 7. Then the Lord appeared to Abram as he's in the land of Shechem. Okay, he's left Haran, he's in Shechem, he's settled down, and then the Bible says he comes to God comes to Abram in the land of Shechem and says this, I will give this land to your descendants. Notice what he doesn't say. I will give this land to you. He says, I will give this land to your descendants. The third thing I want to take that phrase is for your descendants. Do you notice in Genesis 11 that the phrase is, let's do this to make us famous? Let's do this so we don't get scattered. And what does God say in Genesis 12? We don't hoard. We don't do things for ourselves. We don't try to not be scattered. We think about generations. You know what's a fascinating study is how cathedrals are built. Now, we don't have any here on the West Coast because the West Coast is the newest end of America, obviously. But you go to New York and then into Europe, you look at these cathedrals. Do you know how long cathedrals take to get built? 300 to 500 years. Hundreds and hundreds of years to build a cathedral. Could you imagine today if I was taking an offering for something you would never see? What is it about people back then that were willing to sacrifice, give and serve for something they knew I will never see? But I know my great-grandchildren will stand in the cathedral that my generation paid for, and I'm okay not seeing it because it's not just about me. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's not just the God of Abraham. He's not just the God of Isaac. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In other words, he's not just about you. He's about your great-grandchildren that you don't even know yet and won't even see yet. But right now, you are making sacrifices. You are making decisions. You are making steps that are not just for you, that are for your descendants. Abraham, this land is not for you, but it will be because of you. Because you obeyed, because you went, because you sacrificed, because you went out of your land, you won't get this land. But there will come a day when your great-grandchildren will receive a land because you obeyed. This is not for you, but it's because of you. How many days do you think about descendants? Now you're like, I'm 15. I don't think about descendants that often. Good. But all of you in the room today, that you're the first Christian in your family, you did not just make a decision, you started a line. You did not just lift your hand bend your knee, start following Jesus just for you. You have no idea the decision you made to make a decision to follow Jesus, to turn and start walking and living and serving and sacrificing. You didn't just make a decision, you started a new family line. And there will be descendants from generations from now and generations from now that can look back and say, because my great-grandfather decided to stay in Portland, serve Jesus, love the Lord, build the house, now I'm receiving bricks I did not make. I'm receiving cities I did not make. I'm receiving decisions I did not make. Why? Because we are not, let's stay here and hide. We are, what can I do for the people to come? This is not for you. Well, who's it for? Your descendants. Now, let me speak to every one of you in the room. You're like, I have no plan of having kids ever. So this is not for me. I do not just mean literal descendants. You can even, if you have no plan to have physical children, you can still grab people, add them to your life, and give and serve and stow and give values and a backbone and a lens and a worldview and a step. And you can set people up, though they are not from your body, from your loins, from your offspring. You can still grab people and give something to the next generation. So don't dismiss, like, I have no intent of having kids. This is not for me. It is for every one of you in this room. What are you leaving behind? I hope it's more than money. I hope it's more than cars. I hope it's more than a 401k. I hope it's more than some vacation homes. That's awesome. Said them this way. But I hope it's more than physical things we're leaving behind. I hope we're leaving behind our values, our backbones, our decisions, our perspectives, our lens. What are we leaving? Not just for us. For what? Descendants. And if you read later in the book of Joshua, do you know where the first city they conquer and live in after they cross the Jordan? Shechem. Where Abraham is right now. It was a couple hundred years before they got there. But his descendants lived in that land. And he never saw it. God wants to give you some things because of you, but not for you. I'm not stupid most of the time. I'm fully aware the reason why I'm standing on this stage is not because I'm clever, gifted, or called. It's because my grandparents and my great-grandparents decided to make decisions to build the house of the Lord. My grandfather was an orphan. He got dropped off at the steps of the Salvation Army in a basket. Lived in the Salvation Army till 18. Had nowhere to go. You get kicked out at 18. He had nowhere to go, so he joined the army. He's from Australia. One Sunday in the army, Salvation Army, he responded to an altar call. It said, Jesus, I'll do it. After serving his time in the army, he got released, and he felt God say, you should start writing books. You should start writing biblical doctrine, writing books. To this day, my grandfather has been, he died a few years ago, one of the most well-known in the globe theologians and writers. There are millions upon millions of his books on this earth. I use my grandfather's books to study. For today's sermon. He's gone. Kevin John Connor is gone, but his descendants still live. How short-sighted are you? You're so worried about tomorrow? What decisions are we making that our descendants might acquire land that we did not give, that we did not earn, but we made decisions for? Then my grandfather took a 3-month boat trip to America and started the college that I graduated from, that I met my wife at, that I met majority of my best friends at. Cruz's children will reap the benefits of an orphan that made a decision. I will serve the Lord. I'm not dumb. I know why I'm on this stage, and it's not because of me. What stages will you build that you won't even stand on, but your descendants will? We are not the Genesis 11 story of Babel. Let's hoard. Let's hide everything. That's not our story. We're the story of we leave, we go, we sow, we send, we think about what? Our descendants. Not in my notes, I had no intention of saying that. The fourth phrase is it says, then when he gets to Shechem, he builds an altar. What is the story of Genesis 11 about? Building a tower. What is the story of Genesis 12 about? Building an altar. What will you build? Altars or towers? Because every one of you are building something. And you either build towers or altars. What are towers? Look how high I go. What are altars? Look how low I go. What are towers? Look at me. What are altars? Look at God. What story do you want told? Look at my tower. Or look at my altar. Who fills towers? People. Who fills altars? God. What are altars? They're simply these big brazen wood and, like huge bonfires essentially that they would lay sacrifices on. Do you want your story to be, look at what I've built or look what I've sacrificed? What's an interesting fact, and I don't have time to get into it, the band's gonna kick me off, we're gonna take communion, is back in the ancient world, they believed that a god could only occupy a city at a time. So that city was that sun god. That city was the moon god. That city was the god of war, whatever. Each city had a god. And they believed when you leave this city, you leave the god. Because that God only operates in that city. So when you leave, that God stays there. But that's why the account is so important that says that Abraham went to 2 different towns and made 2 different altars to the same God. What was he making a statement of? God is not connected to towns, people, and land. He's connected to people. He's more committed to me than that city. He's more committed to me than that land. And wherever I go, he goes. Let me translate it to your language. I could build an altar in a subway. I could build an altar in my car. I could build an altar in my backyard. I could build an altar at my desk at work. I could build an altar on my ride home on my bike. Wherever I go, because God is not committed to land and buildings and cities and location. God is committed to you. And wherever you go, you can build an altar that God will come and you will meet with. Or you're going to spend your life building towers. And I'm done. The band can join. Ask the same question that I started with. What story do you want told? You put the chart back up. Do you want Genesis 11 or do you want Genesis 12? This is the tale of 2 stories. You want the story of Babel? Or you want the story of Abram? I would submit that we live the story of Abram, not the story of Babel.